leads me into my last quick segment for the day, which relates to actually a case here in Dallas, Texas. Other things like this are happening around the country. But I want to talk about the idea about this hair salon owner in Texas named Shelley Luther, who was arrested for keeping her salon open during the coronavirus shutdown, which continues, or I guess now they're slowly opening things in Texas. Texas is not really behaving, frankly, as well as a red state should behave in this. It's very slow, very plodding, very fearful, slow reopening, not what you'd expect out of the great state of Texas. But I want to say that the woman who was arrested, Shelley Luther, for keeping her salon open, she wasn't hiding it. She wasn't lying about it. She just said, I have to work. My employees need their income. They've got to pay their bills. I've got to pay my bills. I want to open. I want to assert the idea of civil disobedience and remind you that concept of civil disobedience. For some reason, I really recall the discussion in law school about civil disobedience. But the idea of civil disobedience in a nutshell is that if you think there's a law that's unjust, you can try to change it. You can go to the legislature, you can lobby, but sometimes the way you fight it is by violating it and then taking the consequences. Or the basic first principle is that you definitely think you maintain respect for the overall rule of law. You're not overthrowing the government, but you're disobeying a specific law that you perceive as unjust. The second principle is you plead guilty to the violation of the law. You acknowledge that you did it. And so this is what Shelley Luther, if you know the story of Shelley Luther, she ultimately she kept her salon open. They finally had she had several notices from our local county government saying she had to shut down. She's saying, no, this is not right. I'm morally opposed to the law shutting down my salon. And she ended up being called in front of a left-wing judge who was very scolding and demeaning toward her and told her she had to apologize or else he was going to exercise his right to send her off to jail. And she said, I'm not apologizing for feeding my children. She was polite. She didn't call him names. She didn't mock him. He said, apologize for being selfish and for endangering your fellow citizens or something. She just said, no, I'm not apologizing for feeding my children. So she followed the tenets of civil disobedience, which are you respect the rule of law otherwise, but you disobey the law. You're calling out. You're trying to call attention to unjust law, and you plead guilty to the violation of law. And then you attempt, in your effort to fight this bad law, you attempt to convert your opponent to demonstrate why what you did is just. She followed those ideas of civil disobedience. It is the same thing. It's not the same order of magnitude, but it's the same thing. If you think about Rosa Parks, the precious American woman, Black woman, who back in December of 1955 in segregated South decided she wasn't going to sit in the back of the bus in Montgomery, Alabama. That's another example of civil disobedience. She did not violate every law. She did not declare she wasn't going to follow any laws. She said the law that says I have to sit in the back of the bus is segregation, is discrimination, is bigotry. I won't do it. She sat in the seat she wanted to sit in and got arrested and agreed she pled guilty. And she became, of course, an icon, leading America eventually away from the idea of segregation as they were practicing in the South. Now, I know, people, that the wrong law that you saw Rosa Parks protesting was far more evil, far more impactful to a vast number of Americans, because Black Americans in the South, not just Alabama, a bunch of other places, did not have equal rights, and she was right to oppose it. It brought attention to the country, for many people outside the South who didn't live in segregation, to how evil it was. So she engaged in civil disobedience. She broke the law. She accepted responsibility, and she used her case to try to draw attention and change the minds of people who put those laws into place. She obviously were not single-handedly. We had the civil rights era. We had Martin Luther King and many other great Americans, and finally got ourselves to get rid of those laws. But it's the same thing that Shelley Luther's doing in Dallas, shutting down her salon, shutting down all sorts of businesses, randomly, arbitrarily, even in the great state of Texas, randomly and arbitrarily letting some businesses be open, but not other businesses be open, is another example of an unjust law. And that is what Shelley Luther was protesting. And I'll close this show by saying this about that. The danger to America of this shutdown is not just that we had people lost jobs and people lost small businesses. They had to close them forever. They couldn't afford to keep them up. People lost their homes. People lost everything. But that's not even the worst damage flowing from this shutdown, unjustified by science, unjustified by the numbers. The worst damage done to our country is that we have begun to accept the idea that we surrender our liberty when the government tells us we should be frightened. When the government says, to keep you safe from some virus or any virus, to keep you safe, we're going to force you to stay in your home. We're going to tell you you'll be arrested if you go out. If you open your business, you'll be in trouble. This is what we had happen in this country. We surrendered liberty. We're being told we have to surrender our liberty in order for the government to keep us safe. The government cannot be making laws about keeping you safe in this kind of context, because if they can, if we say, sure, anytime government, you think there's a threat, you just tell us how long we have to remain in house arrest in our homes, how long we have to have our businesses closed, how long the economy can be destroyed, and you're going to let us know when, again, it's safe to go out. We have surrendered liberty. That is the worst outcome of this coronavirus. I'm sorry for every single death. Of course, the loss of life is horrific. My heart goes out to everybody. I do know of people who have lost friends in the coronavirus, this horrible epidemic in America. I do know that people, it is lethal and it is painful, and it's been a strain on our system, and it's been hurting American people. But that does not mean that we simply surrender our liberty because the government tells us this is how to keep you safe. Just stay home. We'll let you know when you can leave. The law itself, and as again, it's not just this time, this virus, this shutdown, it is losing the presumption of liberty, and it is investing in or agreeing to the idea that government can shut America down anytime it wants, and you have no recourse. And they can shut you down based on bad data, bad science, bad information, on policies that aren't working. And they can keep the shutdown in place, and there's nothing you can do about it. Shelley Luther, the owner of that salon, stood up as in an honest way, challenging via civil disobedience the idea that the government can just keep you shut down and you have no recourse. She was standing up for, and the larger, when you start to recognize how much the left is benefiting from this shutdown, they are salivating at the idea of all the ads they can run this fall, blaming Trump for every single aspect of the shutdown, every single aspect of America's reaction, looking at a devastated economy, and because they think it gives them power, it gives them the ability and the likelihood to win the presidency this fall. That is an unjust motive for much of what the left continues to do.